You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for clicking. Thanks for joining us. You are watching episode 38 of Guts and Grind. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I'm Sajin Abraham. I'm joined with my co-host, Siju Koshi. How are you doing, Siju?
I'm good, Saj. How are you, man?
Living the dream, man. I was actually just at one of the rental properties. We're turning it around and we're like at the finish line. So it's like that joyful moment of like, oh, we're done. We're done with all the rehab and now, go on to the next part of like getting a renter in there. But it's just nice to put that phase behind us. So I think this weekend will be complete. And then I could put in some we'll get it cleaned up and then, get some pictures and put that all there. So yeah, progress is happening, man. So it's a good thing. Can't complain.
That's exciting times, man. I think I love the end of the project, when you can finally see everything, and it's like, you've seen from what you're describing to me, I haven't been there, but apparently it was a total gut, right?
Yes.
I can imagine you seeing it. You probably in your head, you're probably like, man, if you only saw what this house looked like before.
Yeah, seriously. And part of me is kind of like, you don't want the tenants to know because then they might feel like some type of way, like, what's behind these walls? But like literally, it was a gut. Like we ripped everything out. Like we added a bathroom. Like it was and then there was a lot of hiccups along the way, which you just kind of roll with the punches. You mentally prepare for that, but you hope that it doesn't happen. But all of it happened. So it is what it is.
No, that's exciting times, man. It'll be
So that's good.
It'll be good stuff for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool, man. Yeah, let's dive in. Again, I said this is episode 38, and today we're going to be talking about underwriting. And I know, right? It's not like a fun topic to talk about. And underwriting is really just the paperwork you need for the lender, right?
Yeah.
And like that's basically where we're at. And so it's important. It's still a very important phase of the process, but it's just not glamorous. You know what I mean? It's kind of tedious and it's like a lot of like you doing a lot of digging and researching. Before I keep going, Sid, why don't you just talk about like what typical documents we might need for this process?
Yeah. And I kind of started off with a wonk like comment, right? When we're talking about underwriting and literally underwriting is a fancy word for exactly what Saad said. It is the due diligence that your lenders do whenever they're looking into you to make sure you're qualified for the money they're about to let you borrow. So if you're asking for $100,000, they're going to look into every piece of what you have financially, what's your background, what are, all your bank statements, all this stuff they're going to go through just to make sure that they know who they're lending to. It's not somebody that has a lot of debt. It's not somebody that is over leveraging themselves when they're borrowing money, things like that. And so I compare this, we're going through tax season right now. And I'm like, that's the worst thing because you're just compiling paperwork. I hate it. It's like gathering paperwork. You're going back and forth between your lender and giving them these pieces of information that they're requesting. So that's why I said it's kind of a boring process of the buying process, but it is essential. And it's actually a very critical piece because if you don't pass this, you don't get the money.
Right. And if I could interject just to like, not that the bank needs me to be on their side, but just to kind of, give them a little bit of credit. They're partnering with you on this deal, right? Typically, just for generalities, you're bringing 20% of the purchase price and they're bringing 80% of the purchase price.
Yeah.
So that it's really important for them to know that you could actually afford the note, that you could actually float it. And so all this paperwork, although it's tedious, it makes sense why they need it. And so, why don't we run down the list just so people have an idea of what's needed?
Yeah. So the lender's going to ask you for, and these are standard documents that most lenders are going to ask you for. They're going to ask you for all your bank statements for at least the last 2 months. And the reason why they want to at least see 2 to 3 months is so they're not seeing they want to see that there's steady paychecks coming in. There's not a large influx of money coming in just for the purchase, things like that. They want to see your last probably 1 to 2 years worth of tax returns because the tax return really is the summation of your year's performance, right? So, and they can easily look at that and say, hey, how you're doing for the last 2 years, meaning how much money have you made? Do you have anything going out for businesses, things like that? So your tax returns, you got to make sure you scan those in and give that to them. Probably some check stubs. They're going to want to see at least 2 to 3 months worth of check stubs and any details around your primary house. If you have a house that you're owning today, they may need like HOA information. They may need, your mortgage statement if you have any existing mortgage statements, things like that. So they want to see all this because this is all things that they're checking off on their list to make sure that, hey, you're paying on these things and they're up to date and you're not in arrears on any of these items. So just be ready to do a lot of scanning, taking pictures, sending documents to
Right.
your lender, and they may say, hey, you need to give me this back again, or I need to get this again, I didn't get this one again, or I need a more recent copy of this one. So that those are your standard items, so just be ready with those things when you're preparing with this.
Right, right. Yeah, that's all. Just to reiterate, those are just like the basics, right? Like they have the right to ask for really additional information if they need it because they want to have a full picture of what they're getting themselves into, right? And so just be ready and willing. And so you know what I mean? Because like at the end of the day, they're your partner. You want to make them happy so that way they could give you the money you need to get the ball rolling and get the deal done, right? Some red flags to consider or to look out for and prep for before you even go under underwriting, right? They're gonna do credit checks. And if you have major hits that are like out of the ordinary, that's going to be a red flag. And so you want to either have a reason why those big hits are there, like a big purchase or whatever, or even better, try to avoid it. I remember just a quick story. We were trying to get into like this is early on in our landlording life, right? And we were trying to prep ourselves to be in a position to be able to be lendable. And so the banker I talked to was saying you have a new car note and you have X amount of dollars that's left. It'll look way better if you could pay that off. And so that was great. Like it set a goal for us to be like, all right, well, let's make it a point to like pay this off. Cause in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, we have a 4 or 5 year note. Let's let it ride. But when they said that, I was like, okay, well, let's make it a goal to pay that car off. So that way our debt to income ratio is way better and we're more appealing when it comes to lenders, right? And so those are things that you want to like look out for or plan for if you're in the market to buy a car or do something major or you're going to go on a vacation or something like that. Maybe hold off until you get this lending done, right? Until you get all your stuff situated for the purchase, and then you could go do that, right? So it's a little bit of planning, and sometimes you can't. If you need a car, you need a car, right? So sometimes you can't plan for it, but if you're able to hold off because things are coming down the tube, make the right choice, right? And
Yep.
so that's
And
one thing. Major transactions. Oh, Sid, you go ahead. You were saying
no, no,
something?
I was gonna say, just to dive a little deeper on the debt to income ratio, is basically, how much money you bring in and how much have you borrowed out there, whether it's car, house note, whatever.
Right.
And they use it as a ratio to say, hey, they have a whatever their footprint is. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not a lender by any means, but I assume if you make $50,000, they're gonna allow you maybe 2 to 3 times that. I assume. Just let's use that as an example. Let's just say
Sure.
they may lend out maybe 150,000 or $200,000 worth. It's a enormous amount, right? So they just want to make sure you're not way over leveraged on that,
Right.
and that's what they'll kind of use as the terminology debt to income ratio. Just keep
Right.
that in
No.
mind.
Yeah. Thanks for highlighting that. It's definitely good to have a gauge what these terms mean. But that's basically where it's at. And so another note that I wanted to kind of highlight. So for example, for me, I have multiple bank accounts. I try to do one bank account per house. And so when you're providing these bank statements, they want all of it. And so maybe that's another thing to think about when you're prepping. Because now I'm at a situation where I'm like, man, I don't need all these bank accounts. Maybe I should just do one, like consolidate everything. So that way, as you're churning out more properties and working with lenders more, you want to be able to be quick. And like for me, I just want to get it done. And so even the little thing of like, all right, let me print out the statement for this one and then this one and then this one. And it just kind of keeps growing, right? So think about consolidating that. Another thing that caught me off guard was the lenders wanted HOA statements of the prior year that HOA payments were paid. And so now in my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, I get my HOA statement. Now I just scan it so I have it ready and I have it in a file. So that
Yep.
way, whenever the next one comes around, I'm not shuffling around trying to figure out, oh, where are those HOA statements? They're organized and ready to go. So organization is like huge. If you could be organized, like this whole process, this underwriting process won't be so daunting. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. So, did you have any other additional points you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, just to round out the conversation, so we don't beat this to a pulp here. But yeah, major transactions, you actually mentioned that. So if you're buying a house, don't try to buy any while you're in the process. Don't make any major purchases. Don't try to buy a car or anything like that, because that again goes against your debt to income ratio, right? Or
Right.
even a large purchase of a furniture, things like that. If you're buying a
Yeah.
refrigerator, large transactions, they don't like to see that while you're in the middle of a process of buying. So keep that in mind. And my last thought, I guess, rounding out with this, how strict the lenders have got, is because of the 2008 crash. where housing bubbles were. And for those of you guys who don't know, when that 2008 housing crash happened, it was because lenders were just giving money to anybody without looking at their background at all. So now, because of that crash, they're super strict now. So they are, like Saj said, they're going to ask you for anything and everything, right? If they feel like it's something they need to dive into, they'll say, hey, give me a copy of that. So give me proof that you paid for this, or you've done this part of your due diligence as you're supposed to be when you're paying for something down. So just keep that in mind.
For sure. And just to piggyback on that, hurdles are a good thing. It's good to have these hurdles because it kind of puts checks and balances on everybody. It's a headache, it's a pain, but we don't want 2008 to happen again, right?
Yeah.
And when we didn't have hurdles, I think that's when we should really question it. Be like, oh, is this dangerous? Are we over leveraging ourselves? Are we, just as a society, are we hurting ourselves? Right. So we want these checks and balances. And unfortunately, it just adds more work, right? We need to have proof. We need to have the proof that we could actually afford what we're trying to buy. Right. Also, another thing about the whole major purchases, like major transactions before you purchase a house, let it be a conversation. Like the recent house, or one of the properties that I was doing, I was setting up for a refinance, right? Because I typically buy with private money and then do a cash out refinance, pay back that. So that's so it's still, the transaction has to happen, right? And so, but I was in a spot where I needed to get a new car. So I just talked to my lender. I was like, hey, how hard am I going to get hit if I buy a car right now? And so we had a conversation. He was like, well, if the payment's not going to be significantly more than what your current payment is, then it's not a problem. So even though we said don't go buy a car before you buy a house, if you're in a position where you just need it, then have a conversation with your lender. Like that's why communication is very key. And like we're just giving you like bullet points of like what you should look out for, but don't be afraid to ask questions, because there's there's things to get picked up when you like get into the granular level of things, right? So that's another point that I want to say before we wrap this episode up. Sid, do you have any additional comments?
I do. Sorry, one last thing, and I'll promise I'll be done. But it's a key one. You'll like this, or you'll need this actually. So I think we had an episode about earnest money and option money and things like that. That's one of the things that the lender is going to ask for. They're going to say, hey, what account did you pull your earnest money out of? So you want to make sure you have the bank statement that you have your earnest money that's drawn out of there, because they want to see it came out of your account. They want to make sure your mom's not funding it, or your girlfriend or whoever is giving you money for the earnest money, because that's again due diligence that that you can afford it and you're not borrowing this money through this process. So keep that in mind.
If you need outside money, just make sure that it's in your account for a while. So you know what I'm saying. Like, so if you're getting a gift from your parents or like a loan from someone else to make this purchase, you kind of have to give yourself like a 2 or 3 month lead time. So that money has to be seasoned in there. So that way it's in the account. So there's ways to make it happen, but just be mindful of it, because like that's what the banks are going to be asking for. Right. So
that's
any
it.
more thoughts? Did you any
I'm
other?
Good. No, I'm done. I promise.
Oh, these are gems, man. They're gems. They're good.
They're just coming out, I'm firing away.
Thanks for watching, guys. This is that basically wraps it up. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate y'all clicking and making it all the way to the end of this episode and hearing us rant. As always, please like the videos if you do like it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share with your friends. More than all of that, I'd really like to see comments. I just want to know like where y'all are at. If there's questions or additional information that you want to share with the people that are watching this, like please feel free to comment wherever you're watching this. And with all that said, we'll see you on the next one.
Take care, guys.
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin. Be sure to tune in next time.